Hey everybody, it's the Alarm Doctor here again. It's getting close to flea market and auction time again. It's March and first day of spring, as a matter of fact. So I thought I would do a second video on what I might call flea market tips. And this particular one today is on gong mechanisms and house gongs in general. Now you're out there at a flea market or an auction and you're thinking about buying a gong, and of course obviously one of the first things you're going to look at is what condition the case is in, what condition the glass is in, etc. But if you're like me, if I'm buying a gong for my collection, I really want it to work correctly. And one of the problems you'll find when you go to a flea market or an auction and you're looking at a gong is you'll buy it, take it home, and then I get a phone call that, hey, I just bought this gong and it doesn't work right. So unless you just really want to hang it on the wall and look at it, the idea behind this video here is to show you what you should be looking for as far as the gong mechanism itself, basically to make sure it's all there. So as you can see, these two mechanisms, the configuration is basically the same. It's just that one is larger than the other one. This is probably the latest version mechanism that Gamewell used before they stopped building the oak case or house gongs. Now some of the real early ones, there will be different configurations of the mechanism, so but some of these things you can still be vigilant about checking to make sure that all the parts are there. So I'm going to use this larger mechanism because it'll be easier to see, and we'll get up close and personal here and I'll show you all the parts that should be there. There's a couple other things you might want to check for on the case. One is whether or not this hammer kick spring is mounted into the case or not. Some gongs use this type of hammer kick spring. Some of them actually used a big, large, flat spring like this, and it was mounted similar to that on the hammer lever, usually on the larger gongs, 15 and 18-inch gongs. And what this did was when the hammer came down, it would hit this shaft right here and help throw the spring, or help throw the hammer back up. You'll obviously see a mounting spot for this if it should be there. If it's not there, the thing to check for is to look right here in the flat part of the hammer lever. If there's a nice flat machine surface there with two screw holes in it, it should have one of these flat kick springs with it. The other thing to check for in the case itself is it should have a hole in the glass so that you can wind the gong without opening the door. There should be a small brass porthole in that hole. That was to help keep the dust out of the mechanism. And also the other thing to check for in the case itself is the lock for the gong case door. These are not the same as a key guard lock or a inner case lock. They are configured differently, extremely hard to find if it's not there, and when you do find them, you usually have to pay a pretty hefty price for them. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at here, this is the terminal block / lightning arrestor. Yes, this is a lightning arrestor. Most guys don't realize that. But what we have is an air gap right here, lightning arrestor. You have your circuit coming in on both sides of the terminal block here, and there is supposed to be a ground wire on this. Now, very rarely, unfortunately, did it ever seem to get used. But with this grounded, this creates a spike, a ground for a spike, like a lightning strike. And if you would get a lightning strike, the way this was supposed to work, because of the points here, it was supposed to cause an easy jump for that voltage to go from either leg of the circuit to ground, and of course save your coils. So as we move on down here, of course we have the coils. Most of these coils either had the green cover on them, a lot of them had the just varnish covered copper also. You can usually tell pretty much if they're original or not. If you look real close here, there is a spacer bar right here. Now, if you seem to have an excessive amount of space between the mount and the coils, there is the possibility that the coils aren't original. Usually it's just one bar, and it's usually somewhere around 1/4 of an inch thick. Something else to check for is this is a tension nut for your armature tension spring. Sometimes these are missing. They are knurled on the side. They're a little bit hard to find. You know, you want to make sure that that's there. One of the main things that costs big bucks on these to repair is the main gear. Be very vigilant about checking the teeth on these main gears. They should all be uniform in size and shape. They should have a nice flat edge on the catch paw side. What happens is, after years and years and years, the tops of these either get knocked off, or this straight edge that's here in the front where the paw catches starts getting bent more or less backwards from the years of pounding. And you know, I tell everybody that sends these to me, you know, I have a flat rate for taking these apart and cleaning them up and adjusting them and putting them back together. Where the big buck starts coming in is when you have to find parts or have parts made. I can tell you right now that I can get these gears made, but you're talking anywhere from $150 to $200 just to have the gear made. So be very, very vigilant about checking those gear teeth. Of course, the mainspring, usually that's terribly obvious if it's broken. Mainsprings are also expensive. We can get them, but they are expensive. A lot of times the mainspring can be fixed, because usually it breaks right here where the hoop is on the outside end, or it'll break the center out of it from overwinding, and usually you can re-punch that or re-rivet the hoop on the end. One of the other things to check for is down here on the side, right here, there is a coil spring. Now, springs are, you know, can be made. It's always better if they are there. There's one here and there is one here. Those are two things to check for. Something else to check for, and it's going to be really hard to see, I'm afraid, is right here. You see this cam. This is a cam with a screw in it. Now, the smaller mechanisms have it cast into the frame. This particular one, there's a screw you can take this off. Make sure that's there. The gong will not operate correctly if that's not there. Another thing to look for, and I know it's going to be really, really hard to see, but at the bottom of this paw right here, the paw that's on the hammer lever, there's an extension that goes down below this paw. Check and make sure, if you can, that it's not snapped off. there again, the gong won't work correctly if that's the case. What else can we check for here? Of course, make sure that this return arm is there. One of the other things to check for is there was two variations on the bottom of this armature right here. This is one of them. They used a piece of flat spring steel with a wedge silver soldered to the end of it, and that caught this arm as the armature goes up and down. Now, another version of that looks like this. It has the cast brass version on it, and there's a small spring right underneath of here, which there again, if that's missing, it isn't a big deal. But if this brass part is missing, that is a big deal. The way to tell which version you would have had was if you look at the armature itself. If it took this cast brass type, there are no holes drilled in the armature with threads in them. If it took the flat steel or the flat spring steel one, you'll notice here there are screws, and this is drilled with threads in it. So make sure those parts are there. What else can we check? There's a boot spring on the back here. These can be gotten right here. It won't work correctly if that's not there. You have this flag here, what I call a flag, but it's the single stroke mechanism. It keeps the gong from running away if you get an open circuit. Make sure that's there. There's a flat piece of spring steel right here on the back of that lever, which, you know, makes this. And I had a guy send me one time, he said he couldn't figure out why his gong wasn't working, and this piece right here was totally missing. So those are some things to look for when you're buying a gong. Take one of those really bright LED flashlights, so when you're looking down in a case, you can look to see if any of these parts are missing. Makes it a lot easier. So that's my tip for today. Like I say, you can use some of those things to check for some of those things on some of the other configurations of gongs, even some of the other brands. They're not exactly the same, but they all have similar properties. And like I say, the biggie is to make sure that it appears that everything is there and that main gear isn't tore up. So until next time, this is the Alarm Doctor saying, still today, the fastest, most reliable way to notify the fire department is a municipal telegraph system. Happy hunting!